Back in 1994, there was not a single soul on the ice more terrifying than Eric Lindros. Standing 6'4" and weighing 240 pounds, he possessed Gretzky's elite finesse, trapped inside a human wrecking ball, but an unseen force was slowly tearing him apart. By the time we finish this story, you will grasp exactly why this specific trauma remains the ultimate career killer in professional athletics. The date was June 22nd, 1991, and the atmosphere inside Buffalo's Memorial Auditorium was absolutely electric. With the Quebec Nordiques holding the top selection, every scout and fan in the arena already had one name etched into their minds. The Nordics management stepped up to the podium beaming with pride to announce the first overall choice of the 1991 NHL entry draft. The Big E, Eric Lindros. This is where the narrative takes a bizarre turn because before a single puck dropped, Lindros flatly refused to suit up for the Quebec franchise. It was not some high-stakes contract leverage or a simple bluff. He stared down the Nordiques' primary owner, Marcel Aubut, and gave him a hard no, choosing to sit out the entire 1991-92 season instead of putting on that sweater. The National Hockey League had never witnessed such a brazen act of defiance from a top-tier prospect. Imagine an 18-year-old kid essentially holding an entire professional sports organization hostage to his own demands. Eventually, Quebec threw in the towel, and by June 30th, 1992, a legal arbitrator had to resolve a chaotic bidding war between Philly and the Rangers. Philadelphia emerged victorious, but the price tag was astronomical, involving a massive haul of 6 established players. A package that featured a phenomenal young Swedish talent by the name of Peter Forsberg, alongside 2 future first-round selections and $15 million in straight cash. Those assets eventually paved the way for the franchise to move to Colorado and secure a Stanley Cup championship. That gives you a glimpse into the incredible perceived value of one man before he even stepped onto the ice for an NHL shift. Once Lindros touched down in the city of brotherly love, the very fabric of the game seemed to revolve around his presence. Flyers general manager Bobby Clarke recalled scouting him as a teen, claiming he was the most gifted 16-year-old hockey player he had ever laid eyes on. Essentially pro-ready at 16, by September 1994, Clarke officially named 21-year-old Lindros the team captain. He centered a line flanked by John LeClair and Mikhail Renberg, a trio the press famously dubbed the Legion of Doom. That nickname became legendary simply because it was an honest description of their absolute dominance. Whenever those 3 gained possession, your defensive core was essentially living through a nightmare. And if you managed to get the puck, they would physically punish you until they snatched it back. During the lockout-shortened 1994-95 campaign, Lindros racked up 29 goals and 41 assists for 70 points in only 48 appearances. He took home both the Hart Trophy for League MVP and the Lester B. Pearson Award as the top player chosen by his fellow skaters. Keep in mind, he was only 22 years old at the time. Throughout his tenure in Philly, the only names with a higher points per game average were legends like Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr. By 1997, he had single-handedly willed the Flyers all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals. Detroit may have swept them, but Lindros played out of his mind, leading the entire postseason with 26 points across 19 matchups. At just 24, the consensus throughout the hockey world was that he was just getting started. Everyone thought this was the dawn of a hockey dynasty, but they were wrong. Something was already breaking beneath the surface. It was not a busted knee or a bad back, nothing a medical trainer could wrap up or a surgeon could easily repair. The initial damage had actually occurred years prior, tracing all the way back to his junior hockey days when he was only 17. The scariest part was that absolutely no one, Eric included, realized the clock had already started ticking. Fast forward years later, while addressing a group of medical students, Lindros confessed that his initial concussion likely took place at age 17 during his time in the Ontario Hockey League. Back then, he did not have a clue what was actually happening to his brain. He just felt strangely out of sync, a bit detached, as if his entire reality had shifted slightly off its axis. In those days, the term concussion was rarely if ever used in the locker room. They just labeled it a vague upper body injury, and he kept grinding because that was the old school hockey culture. The heavy-duty NHL impacts began in earnest on March 7th, 1998, when Pittsburgh blue liner Darius Kasparaitis caught him with a massive clean hit that left him sidelined for 18 games. However, the most chilling detail surfaced after he finally reached the visitors' locker room showers. He gazed at those towels, seeing that specific Penguins logo, and truly believed he'd been traded to Pittsburgh. One day, I was just tracking a slow puck that was sliding towards me along the boards when Kasparaitis suddenly darted right across the blue line. I never saw him. I eventually woke up inside the trainer's shower room. The only bright spot in that fog was believing I'd been sent to Pittsburgh to play with Mario Lemieux. He laughs now, but the reality of that concussion was truly frightening. Philly just sent him to a headache doctor because in 1998, the league understood very little about trauma inside a player's skull. His return to the ice was December 29th, 1998. He took 2 hard hits during one single shift, falling down after dodging a hit before Jason Weimer slammed him. He missed 2 games and returned. Then came the night things broke forever. It wasn't even a concussion this time. On April 1st, 1999 in Nashville, Lindros felt a sharp chest pain. The team medical staff simply diagnosed a minor rib injury. That night, teammate Keith Jones found Eric in their hotel bathtub, pale and gasping. 3 liters of blood had filled his chest cavity. The Flyers trainer was ordered to put Eric on a flight home. Jones refused and insisted they take him to a hospital instead. The Nashville doctors confirmed exactly what Keith Jones had already sensed. Had he boarded that plane, the cabin pressure would have been fatal. His father, Carl, wrote a letter to the team detailing that reality. Carl had been Eric's agent and manager for several years, and had been clashing with Bobby Clarke over Eric's medical care. The media often painted Carl as a father who wouldn't let go. Clarke questioned Eric's toughness in the press quite frequently, but John LeClair later voiced the truth everyone was ignoring. When Eric got concussions, the team's plan was a few days rest. Nobody understood it yet. A concussion is not just a simple bruise. It isn't a bone that heals, it's the brain rattling inside the skull, tearing sensitive nerve fibers at a level we cannot see, causing inflammation in a space with zero room to expand. Every hit taken before healing lowers the threshold for the next injury. The real damage wasn't just the hits, but the time between them. During those weeks, Lindros honestly thought his body was finally recovering. What does that damage look like when it follows you back home? When the rink lights fade and you're alone with a racing mind, doctors call it post-concussion syndrome when the symptoms just won't leave. Throbbing headaches that sit behind your eyes for many weeks. Fatigue so heavy that grocery shopping feels like a full hockey game. Light sensitivity that makes a busy airport terminal feel completely unbearable. For an athlete who lived his life under those bright arena floodlights, surrounded by 20,000 screaming fans, these symptoms didn't just linger. They struck at the very core of his entire daily existence. Eric eventually opened up about the internal turmoil of that specific era, and the reality he described bore no resemblance to the unstoppable juggernaut fans remembered. He confessed to becoming incredibly cynical, losing his cool, and possessing a temper that was completely foreign. A paralyzing sense of panic took root, manifesting without any cause and offering no escape. This persistent low-frequency vibration of dread followed him home, bleeding into every mundane moment of his day. He found himself unable to handle large crowds, airports, or packed rooms. The usual trappings of fame became the very things he began to fear the most. His physical weight increased by exactly 30 pounds. His personal connections crumbled as his personality warped into something unrecognizable that he simply could no longer control. He eventually came clean about how the brain trauma fueled an explosive aggression he could neither justify nor suppress. It was no longer just the prospect of taking another hit that terrified him. The horror was the realization that his true identity might have vanished. During a 2017 sit-down, a journalist pressed him to describe exactly how those injuries had affected him. He muttered a vulgar response. When the interviewer suggested using the term irritable, Eric nodded, but the heavy silence preceding his answer spoke much louder than words. He noted that rehashing the past was useless and insisted this wasn't some calculated attempt to win a media war. This was simply his reality. Look at the chronology. In 1995, he was the league's MVP. In 1996, he tallied 115 points. By 97, he led the Flyers to the finals as the top scorer. His initial officially recorded concussion didn't occur until March of 1998. The window between his absolute prime and the total collapse was under 2 years. That isn't a gradual fading, it is a sudden drop through a trap door. Throughout that ordeal, Eric grasped a truth that the hockey establishment desperately tried to ignore. He told a major sports magazine that beneath all the gear and the physical play, there is a human with feelings. The culture of keeping quiet about what players endured simply wasn't a working solution. Consequently, the trauma continued to pile up hidden from everyone except the man absorbing the blows. The 1999 to 2000 campaign was meant as a restart, but instead it became the year where everything he built unraveled in the public eye. On January 14, 2000, a hit from Chris Tamir sidelined him for 4 games with concussion number 3. Then on March 4th, a collision with Hal Gill of the Bruins forced him back into the Flyers' medical system once again. The team doctors initially labeled his condition as severe post-traumatic migraines, before eventually and quietly reclassifying the injury as a grade 1 concussion. Lindros played 4 more matches while symptomatic before seeking a second opinion from the renowned specialist Dr. James Kelly, the specialist who diagnosed a grade 2 concussion and stated that the Flyers trainers should have caught it immediately. When Eric voiced his frustration over the error, Bobby Clarke viewed the criticism as a betrayal. By March 27, 2000, Clarke stripped the captaincy from Lindros and handed the letter to defenseman Eric Desjardins. Cameras captured the team's equipment manager Turk Evers as he stitched the letter onto Desjardins' sweater for the entire world to see. Just 2 years prior, Clarke had respected Lindros enough to name him Olympic captain for Team Canada over legends like Gretzky and Yzerman. Now he was publicly shaming him while he recovered from a brain injury the team's own medical staff missed. Lindros finally suffered a 5th brain injury during a team practice as he tried returning for the upcoming playoff season. He remained sidelined for the first 16 games of the Flyers' 2000 postseason. During the Eastern Conference Finals against the New Jersey Devils, Philadelphia's 3-1 series lead began slowly evaporating away from them into very thin air. Lindros essentially forced his way back into the lineup for Game 6. He netted the Flyers' only goal in a tough 2-1 defeat, so he dressed for Game 7 on May 26, 2000 in Philadelphia. About 7 minutes and 50 seconds into the very first period, Lindros began carrying the puck into the offensive zone while keeping his head low. It was a habit he could never break, a flaw that left him vulnerable whenever he played at his most aggressive. Devils captain Scott Stevens stepped up from his defensive position. Stevens pinched from the blue line, driving his shoulder directly into Lindros' chin and also his forehead area. Lindros collapsed onto the ice and simply did not move. That was his 6th concussion as a Flyer, his 4th in 5 months. The hit was legal according to the NHL rules of that era. Today, however, that hit would draw a major penalty, a game misconduct, and a likely league suspension. Stevens later admitted he never felt comfortable with that specific hit becoming one of his top career-defining highlights. The Devils won 2-1 behind Patrick Elias's 2 goals and eventually went on to capture the whole Stanley Cup. That marked the very last time Eric Lindros wore a Philadelphia Flyers uniform. He sat out the entire 2001 season while demanding a trade. On August 20th, 2001, Bobby Clarke finally traded him to the Rangers for Jan Hlavak, Kim Johnson, Pavel Brendel, and also a top draft pick. During his debut season in New York, Lindros put up 73 points in exactly 72 total games. For a brief window, it really looked like the vintage version of him might still exist somewhere deep under all that damage. But the success didn't last, and his scoring numbers dropped every year after that. An 8th career concussion in 2004 limited him to exactly 39 games. He eventually moved to Toronto, then Dallas, where he scored only 5 goals in 49 games during his very final professional season. Following a tough playoff loss to Vancouver, Lindros later mentioned he knew that his journey as a star was finally over. He truly wanted the season to continue, but he also wanted his career to end because he simply was not having any more fun playing his game. Eric Lindros officially retired on November 8, 2007 in his hometown of London, Ontario at exactly 34. His career totals of 760 games and 865 total points earned him an induction into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2016. Those numbers also carry the weight of what was left behind, given 760 games played over 13 very long seasons. Seasons means he averaged roughly 58 games a year in a sport that typically plays 82 total regular games. Healing from the mental damage those concussions caused off the ice took much longer than the actual career itself. Lindros spent many years working closely with a mental health professional. He managed the anxiety and personality shifts that had followed him out of the professional game and into retirement. He encouraged other athletes to seek help, saying he now feels strong and productive. He feels vibrant today, though the path to getting there was its own difficult road. Many people do not know that Eric's brother Brett played for the New York Islanders and retired back on May 1st, 1996 at age 20 because of his own post-concussion syndrome. This invisible injury affected both brothers and cut short 2 professional hockey careers instead of just one single career. That personal history drove him. That drive led him toward advocacy work that may end up mattering even more than anything he ever did on the ice. Way back in 2013, a 17-year-old rugby standout from Ottawa named Rowan Stringer suffered 3 separate concussions in less than 1 week during high school matches and tragically passed away as a direct result of suffering second impact syndrome. The official coroner's inquest produced 49 specific recommendations. Legislation was proposed in Ontario to implement those safety measures. Yet that bill went absolutely nowhere until Lindros finally intervened personally. Rowan's Law was finally passed in June 2016, standing as the very first concussion-related piece of legislation in Canadian history, mandating that schools and athletic organizations adopt formal protocols for identifying and properly managing traumatic brain injuries. Lindros was ultimately appointed to the advisory board and donated $5 million of his own wealth to the London Health Sciences Centre for Concussion Research. When questioned about the NHL's handling of these serious head injuries, Lindros told the Canadian Parliament that anytime you mix elite athletics and big money, the moral line inevitably starts to blur. And he urged lawmakers to focus their collective energy on youth sports, where the culture could still be overhauled from the ground up. He also stood his ground against NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman's stubborn and repeated refusal to acknowledge a direct link between hockey concussions and CTE, stating he couldn't fathom how the NFL could change its stance while the NHL still refused to do the same. The most direct visual proof that Lindros' suffering actually moved the needle arrived in January 2011 when Sidney Crosby, the next great generational talent, the next top overall selection, sustained a brutal and career-altering concussion. Unlike the Lindros-era days, the Pittsburgh Penguins kept Crosby sidelined until he was fully medically cleared, adhering to safety standards that were non-existent when Lindros was being sent to migraine clinics and put on planes with collapsed lungs. Crosby fought his way back. Lindros was never the same again. But Crosby got that second act because Lindros forced the entire hockey world to take the invisible injury seriously. In 2017, the league recognized him as one of the 100 greatest players in the history of the game. During 2018, the Philadelphia Flyers, the same organization that stripped his captaincy and mocked his physical toughness, finally retired his number 88 and lifted it into the arena rafters forever. Eric Lindros was destined to be the most dominant force of his generation. For a few prime years, he was exactly that, yet he never lifted the Stanley Cup. He never got to become the legend he was supposed to be. The injury that ruined him left no scar, no cast, and no mark to point at. It just quietly took everything away. His elite skill, his sense of self, and his happiness vanished hit by hit, while the sport's power brokers simply looked the other way. That invisible trauma ended a superstar's run, but it finally forced an entire sport to open its eyes. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button right now, because the most brutal hits in hockey aren't always the ones you can see coming. And if you want to support more stories like this, hit the super thanks button down below. Every single contribution goes directly toward creating these deep dives.